Sergeant Marcus Reed had been working on alien armor long enough to know that each species had their own particular quirks when it came to protective gear. Human exosuits were straightforward, mechanical, logical, designed for efficiency and easy repair. Zephyrian battle armor was an entirely different beast. The piece currently occupying his workbench looked more like a work of art than military equipment. Intricate patterns of biomechanical threading ran through the ceramic metal composite, and the power cells pulsed with a soft blue light that seemed almost organic. It was beautiful, sophisticated, and currently held together with what amounted to battlefield prayers and emergency sealant. "How bad is it?" asked the armor's owner from across the hangar bay. Marcus looked up from his diagnostic scanner to see Commander Lyra Velnathy approaching his workstation. Even without her armor, she moved with the fluid grace that marked experienced Zephyrian warriors. Predatory efficiency wrapped in casual confidence. Her blue skin bore the faint tracery of old scars, and her elongated ears twitched slightly as she assessed his expression. "Bad enough that I'm surprised you made it back in one piece," Marcus said honestly. "The chest plate has microfractures throughout the primary support matrix. The power coupling for your left arm is held together by sheer determination, and I think something has been nesting in your targeting system." "Nesting?" "Small creature, probably rodent-like. Left behind what I'm hoping are just food stores." Marcus gestured to a small pile of unidentifiable organic matter he'd extracted from the helmet's electronics. "The good news is that most of the damage is reparable. The bad news is that it's going to take most of the night." Lyra settled into a chair beside his workbench, apparently content to wait while he worked. "I have nowhere else to be." "Don't you have a debriefing to attend?" "Mission reports to file." "Filed 3 hours ago. Debriefing is scheduled for tomorrow morning." She watched as Marcus began carefully disassembling the chest plate's outer layer. "Besides, this armor has kept me alive for 2 years on this world. I prefer to supervise its care personally." Marcus had worked on dozens of Zephyrian suits during his deployment to Forward Operating Base Kepler-7, but he'd never had the armor's owner supervise the process. Usually, the warriors dropped off their gear and disappeared until repairs were complete. "Is that normal? Staying to watch the repairs?" "Nothing about this posting has been normal," Lyra said. 3-day reconnaissance missions into enemy territory, insurgent attacks on supposedly secure positions, equipment failures that shouldn't be possible with properly maintained gear. She gestured to her damaged armor. "This is the 4th major repair in 6 months. Heavy combat will do that to equipment." "This wasn't combat damage," Lyra said. "Not most of it. The microfractures are from sonic weapons the insurgents shouldn't possess. The power coupling failure matches the signature of electromagnetic pulse devices that aren't supposed to exist outside of military research facilities." Marcus paused in his work, looking more closely at the damage patterns. She was right, the wear patterns didn't match standard combat stress. Someone's been supplying the insurgents with advanced weapons, he realized. Someone with access to technology that can specifically target Zephyrian military equipment, Lyra confirmed. Which raises interesting questions about who we're really fighting and why. Marcus returned to his work, but with increased attention to the damage analysis. If the insurgents had access to weapons designed to defeat Zephyrian armor, he needed to understand how they worked in order to develop countermeasures. "The biomechanical threading has been deliberately disrupted," he said after several minutes of careful examination. "This isn't random damage, someone targeted the specific integration points between the organic and mechanical systems." "Can you repair it?" "Yes, but it's going to require recalibrating the entire neural interface." "That means..." Marcus hesitated. "That means..." "That means you'll need to wear the armor during the final calibration phase. The biomechanical systems need to interface with your nervous system to establish proper baselines." Lyra nodded as if this was routine, though Marcus suspected it wasn't. "How long will that take?" "An hour, maybe 2. But it'll mean sitting very still while I work around the interface points. I've had worse duties." Marcus began the delicate process of replacing the damaged biomechanical threading, aware that Lyra was watching his every movement with the focused attention of someone whose life depended on his competence. "You're very good at this," she observed after he successfully grafted a new neural pathway into the armor's control matrix. "I've had a lot of practice. Turns out humans have a knack for understanding mechanical systems, even when they're mixed with alien biology." "It's more than that," Lyra said. "I've watched other technicians work on Zephyrian armor. They approach it like a machine to be fixed. You approach it like a living thing to be healed." Marcus considered this while carefully adjusting the power flow through the newly installed threading. "Maybe because it is alive, in a way. The biomechanical integration means the armor becomes part of the wearer. Fixing it requires understanding that relationship. Most humans don't think of it that way. Most humans haven't spent 8 months working exclusively on gear that keeps their alien colleagues alive." Lyra smiled at that, the expression transforming her face from professional warrior to something warmer and more approachable. "Is that why you requested assignment to the Joint Operations Base?" "I requested assignment somewhere I could do work that mattered," Marcus said. "Turns out maintaining the equipment that keeps people alive qualifies. Even when those people aren't human." "Especially then," Marcus said. "Human armor tech is straightforward. Zephyrian gear is an art form. Every suit tells a story about the person who wears it. What story does mine tell?" Marcus looked up from his work to meet her golden eyes, noting the genuine curiosity in her expression. "It tells me you're someone who pushes equipment past its design limits but takes care of it anyway. Someone who values function over appearance but appreciates craftsmanship. Someone who's been fighting for a long time but hasn't let it make you careless. That's quite a lot to read from damaged armor." "Armor reflects the person wearing it," Marcus said. "Especially biomechanical systems that literally bond with the user." "And what does your equipment tell people about you?" Marcus gestured to his workstation, which was organized with military precision but personalized with modifications that improved efficiency. "Probably that I'm obsessive about details and think most regulations are suggestions rather than rules." "I noticed the modifications," Lyra said. "Standard Alliance protocol doesn't authorize half the tools you're using." "Standard Alliance protocol assumes technicians will only work on human equipment," Marcus replied. "When you're maintaining gear that keeps alien warriors alive, you learn to improvise. Improvisation is a valuable skill in combat. Improvisation is a survival skill everywhere." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, Marcus making steady progress on the armor repairs while Lyra provided occasional guidance on the more esoteric aspects of Zephyrian technology. As the night progressed, Marcus became increasingly aware that this was the longest personal conversation he'd had in months. "All right," he said finally, "I'm ready for the calibration phase. You'll need to put on the chest plate while I adjust the neural interface points." Lyra stood and moved to the armor rack where the repaired chest piece waited. As she lifted it into position, Marcus noticed that the repair work had required removing some of the ceremonial elements that normally provided modest coverage around the integration points. "Fair warning," he said, "the interface calibration requires access to the neural contact points. The armor design means you'll need to work around areas that are usually covered," Lyra finished calmly. "I'm aware of the requirements, Marcus. I trust you to be professional." As she settled the chest plate into position, Marcus tried to focus on the technical aspects of the calibration rather than the fact that he was working in very close proximity to a remarkable woman who seemed to trust him completely. "The primary interface is responding well," he said, adjusting the biomechanical threading where it connected to neural pathways along her collarbone. "But the secondary interface near the solar plexus is showing irregular readings." He reached to adjust the connection point, and the chest plate shifted slightly as the armor's adaptive systems tried to accommodate the calibration. The movement revealed more of the integration points than either of them had expected. Marcus froze, his hand suspended inches from the adjustment he needed to make, suddenly very aware of the intimacy of the situation. Lyra's golden eyes met his, and he saw something that might have been amusement in her expression. "Careful," she said softly, her voice carrying a hint of something that definitely wasn't purely professional. "The armor is more sensitive than it appears." Marcus realized she could be talking about the equipment, or something else entirely. "I'll be very careful," he said, managing to keep his voice steady as he completed the adjustment with hands that were perhaps not quite as steady as they should have been. "Good," Lyra said, and the smile that accompanied the word suggested that the war outside had indeed become very, very far away. The neural interface calibration took longer than Marcus had anticipated, partly because of the complex nature of biomechanical integration, and partly because he was discovering that Zephyrian armor systems were far more responsive to emotional states than human equipment manuals had indicated. "The biometric readings are fluctuating," he said, studying the diagnostic display with professional concern while trying to ignore the fact that he was close enough to catch the subtle scent of whatever soap Lyra used, something that reminded him of night-blooming flowers. "That's normal during extended calibration," Lyra explained. "The armor adapts to the wearer's current physiological state. Extended combat, stress, fatigue, all of it affects the baseline readings." "What about other emotional states?" Marcus asked, noting spikes in the biomechanical response that didn't correlate with any combat-related stress patterns. "The armor responds to everything," Lyra said, and there was definitely amusement in her voice now. "Zephyrian military doctrine emphasizes the integration of warrior and equipment. Complete emotional transparency with the armor systems." "Meaning?" "Meaning the armor knows exactly how I'm feeling right now." Marcus looked up from his scanner to meet her golden eyes, noting that her expression carried the same subtle amusement that had colored her voice. "And how are you feeling right now?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Like this is the most interesting armor calibration I've ever experienced." Before Marcus could respond to that, the chest plate's adaptive camouflage system activated without warning, causing Lyra to flicker in and out of visibility like a malfunctioning hologram. "What the?" Marcus reached for his emergency shutdown controls, but Lyra was already laughing. "The camouflage responds to adrenaline spikes," she explained as her image stabilized. "Apparently, the system interpreted my elevated heart rate as a combat situation." "Your heart rate is elevated. Yours isn't." Marcus realized she was right. Working in such close proximity to her, managing the delicate calibration while hyper-aware of every small movement and breath, had indeed elevated his pulse considerably. "The scanner is reading both our biometric signatures," he said, understanding dawning. "The armor is trying to compensate for two different sets of physiological responses." "Which explains the irregular readings," Lyra said. "The system is confused about whose emotional state it should be calibrating to. That's actually a problem. The armor needs to sync specifically with your neural patterns, not mine. Can you filter out your biometric signature?" Marcus studied the scanner readings, noting the way the two different patterns were interfering with each other. "Maybe. But it would require isolating your specific neural frequency while maintaining the calibration connection." "What would that involve?" "Physical contact with the interface points while I run a diagnostic isolation protocol," Marcus said, then immediately realized how that sounded. "I mean, direct skin contact with the biomechanical connection points to establish a clear baseline between your nervous system and the armor's response matrix." "I understood what you meant," Lyra said, and her tone carried the same gentle amusement that seemed to characterize most of her interactions with him. "The question is whether you're comfortable with that level of professional intimacy." "Professional intimacy," Marcus repeated. "Is that what we're calling this? What would you call it?" Marcus considered the question while making adjustments to his scanner settings. "I'd call it two people doing their jobs despite circumstances that are somewhat more personal than either of us expected." "That's a very diplomatic way to put it." "I'm a technician, not a diplomat." "You're a technician who's been making me feel more comfortable and relaxed than I have in months," Lyra said. "That seems fairly diplomatic to me." Marcus paused in his work, looking up to meet her eyes. "How long since you've had a conversation that wasn't about tactics, missions, or military objectives. How long have I been deployed to Varian Prime? 2 years. Then it's been 2 years. That's... Marcus tried to find words for how that made him feel. That's awful. It's military life, Lyra said with a shrug that didn't quite hide the loneliness behind her casual tone. Combat deployments don't leave much time for personal relationships. What about before you were deployed here? Friends, family, romantic relationships? Zephyrian military culture emphasizes duty above personal connections, she said. Warriors are expected to be dedicated to the service above all else. Expected by whom? By everyone. Command structure, fellow warriors, society in general. Lyra's expression grew more serious. A Zephyrian warrior who prioritizes personal relationships over duty is considered unreliable. That sounds like a convenient way for the military to ensure they have soldiers who never question orders or ask for leave. It's a traditional approach that has served our people well for centuries. Has it served you well? Lyra was quiet for a moment, and Marcus could see her considering the question more seriously than he'd expected. It's made me an effective warrior, she said finally. But effectiveness and fulfillment aren't the same thing. No, they're not. Marcus returned to the scanner, making careful adjustments while processing their conversation. He was learning more about Zephyrian culture in one evening than months of technical manuals had taught him. What about you? Lyra asked. How long since you've had a personal conversation that wasn't about work? About the same, Marcus admitted. Though in my case, it's because I chose a specialty that keeps me working alone most of the time. Why? Because human social dynamics can be complicated. Working with equipment is straightforward. Machines do what they're designed to do, respond predictably to proper maintenance, and don't have hidden agendas. Unlike people. Unlike most people. But not all people. Marcus looked up from his scanner to find Lyra watching him with an expression of genuine interest. Present company excluded, he said. You find me uncomplicated? I find you honest, Marcus said. You say what you mean, you do what you say you'll do, and you don't pretend to be something you're not. Those are rare qualities. In my experience, yes. Perhaps you've been spending time with the wrong people. Perhaps I've been avoiding spending time with people in general. Until tonight. Until tonight, Marcus agreed. He completed the neural isolation protocol, and the scanner readings immediately stabilized into clear patterns that showed the armor system synchronizing perfectly with Lyra's nervous system. There, he said with satisfaction. Clean calibration, full system integration, optimal response patterns across all interfaces. How does it feel? Lyra asked, moving carefully to test the armor's responsiveness. Perfect, she said, and the smile that accompanied the word made Marcus realize she might not be talking entirely about the armor. The biomechanical threading is showing excellent integration, he said, trying to maintain professional focus. Neural response time is optimal, and the power distribution is significantly more efficient than the original configuration. You've improved it. We've improved it, Marcus corrected. Your understanding of how the systems work in combat situations combined with my technical knowledge created solutions neither of us could have achieved alone. Partnership, Lyra said thoughtfully. Partnership, Marcus agreed. I like that concept. So do I. As Lyra tested the full range of the armor's functions, Marcus began cleaning up his workstation and filing his repair reports. The night shift was nearly over, and soon the hangar would fill with the activity of another day in an ongoing military campaign. Marcus, Lyra said as she secured the armor systems for storage, would you be interested in consulting on additional modifications? Improvements that could benefit other Zephyrian units? I'd be honored to help. It would require working closely together. Regular collaboration sessions, detailed analysis of combat performance, extensive testing of new configurations. That sounds like exactly the kind of project I'd want to be involved in. Good, Lyra said, and the warmth in her voice suggested that their partnership was already expanding beyond purely professional boundaries. I'll speak with my commander about establishing a formal technical collaboration program. And I'll speak with mine about expanding my role to include cross-species equipment development. As they prepared to leave the hangar, Marcus realized that what had started as a routine armor repair had become something much more significant, the beginning of a collaboration that promised to be both professionally rewarding and personally meaningful. Lyra, he said as they reached the hangar exit, thank you for trusting me with your armor. And with the conversation. Thank you for seeing the warrior and the woman, she replied. Most people only see one or the other. Most people are missing out on a remarkable combination. As they parted ways, Lyra to her quarters and Marcus to his, both understood that their relationship had shifted into territory that was uncharted but full of interesting possibilities. Behind them, the repaired armor hummed softly in its storage cradle, biomechanical systems maintaining perfect integration patterns that reflected not just technical excellence, but the harmony that could be achieved when two people chose to work together rather than alone. Marcus was documenting the final specifications for Lyra's armor modifications when the base alarms started screaming. The sound cut through the hangar bay like a blade, transforming the quiet night shift into organized chaos as emergency protocols activated throughout forward operating base Kepler 7. All personnel to combat stations, came the announcement over the base communication system. This is not a drill. Repeat, all personnel to combat stations. Through the hangar's main entrance, Marcus could see soldiers running toward defensive positions while the base's automated systems began sealing blast doors and activating energy shields. The familiar routine of a base under attack, except this time the timing was wrong. Insurgent attacks usually came at dawn or dusk, not during the middle of the night shift. Marcus. Lyra's voice carried across the hangar as she sprinted toward his workstation, already pulling on pieces of her armor. How quickly can you get my systems online? 2 minutes for basic functionality, Marcus said, abandoning his documentation to help her with the more complex armor components. 5 minutes for full optimization. We may not have 5 minutes, Lyra said, sealing the chest plate while Marcus activated the power systems. The attack patterns are wrong. Too coordinated, too well informed about our defensive positions. Inside intelligence? Either that, or they've been watching us longer than we thought. The armor's biomechanical systems came online with their usual soft chime, but immediately Marcus could see problems on his diagnostic scanner. The repairs were holding, but the power distribution was running at barely optimal levels. The neural interface calibration is drifting, he said, making rapid adjustments to the biomechanical threading. The system needs another hour to fully stabilize. Then we'll have to work with what we have, Lyra said, testing the armor's responsiveness while Marcus continued his real-time adjustments. Commander Velnathi. The voice belonged to Lieutenant Torres from base security, who appeared in the hangar entrance looking harried and urgent. We need reconnaissance on the western perimeter. The insurgents have disabled our sensor arrays, and we're fighting blind. On my way, Lyra replied, then looked at Marcus. Can you monitor the armor systems remotely? Not from here, Marcus said, making a decision that violated several safety protocols. But I can monitor them from a portable scanner if I come with you. Marcus, this is combat deployment, not equipment testing. This is equipment that could fail if the calibration continues to drift, Marcus said, grabbing his emergency repair kit and a tactical scanner. You need someone who can adjust the biomechanical interface on the fly. It's too dangerous. It's more dangerous to deploy with armor that might fail at a critical moment, Marcus interrupted. Besides, someone needs to document how the modifications perform under actual combat conditions. Lyra looked at him for a moment, clearly torn between professional concern for his safety and tactical recognition that he was right about the armor's instability. Stay behind me at all times, she said finally. Follow my lead, do exactly what I tell you, and if I say run, you run. Understood? Understood. They moved through the base's corridors toward the western perimeter, Lyra's enhanced sensors and tactical training guiding them around areas where fighting was heaviest. Marcus followed close behind, his scanner showing him the real-time performance of her armor while his eyes adapted to the strange perspective of seeing combat from behind cover rather than through after-action reports. "The targeting system is overcompensating for the calibration drift," he said quietly as they paused at a corridor junction. "I can adjust it, but I'll need access to the helmet interface." "Now." 30 seconds. Lyra nodded and positioned herself to provide security while Marcus connected his scanner to the armor's helmet systems. The adjustment was more complex than usual because he was working in combat conditions, but the biomechanical threading responded to his modifications with the kind of precision that suggested their partnership was extending beyond emotional compatibility into genuine technical synchronization. "Better?" he asked. "Much better," Lyra confirmed, her targeting display now showing clean, accurate readings. "The response time has improved significantly." They reached the western perimeter to find a scene of controlled chaos. Human and Zephyrian soldiers were working together to repel insurgent forces that had somehow penetrated the base's outer defenses, but the coordination between different species' tactics was creating gaps that the enemy was exploiting. "The problem is communication," Lyra observed, analyzing the tactical situation with the kind of rapid assessment that made her reputation as a reconnaissance specialist. "Human and Zephyrian units are using different protocols, different frequencies, different tactical languages. Can you coordinate between them?" "I can try, but the armor's communication system isn't designed for multi-species integration." Marcus looked at his scanner, noting the biomechanical pathways that connected Lyra's nervous system to the armor's various functions. "What if we modify the communication protocols in real time? Use the biomechanical interface to translate between human and Zephyrian tactical systems?" "That's theoretically possible, but it would require someone who understands both the technical specifications and the real-time performance requirements," Marcus finished. "Someone who's spent months working on interspecies equipment integration. Someone like you. Someone like us working together." Lyra nodded, and Marcus began the complex process of rewiring the armor's communication systems while she provided tactical coordination for the increasingly desperate defense. The modification required him to work directly with the biomechanical pathways, adjusting neural connections while Lyra simultaneously used them to coordinate military units. "Human units, fall back to secondary positions," Lyra's voice carried across the battlefield through communication systems that were now translating her tactical assessments into languages and protocols that human soldiers could understand. "Zephyrian units, advance to cover the withdrawal." The effect was immediate and dramatic. Instead of fighting parallel battles with minimal coordination, the human and Zephyrian forces began moving as a unified defensive unit, their different tactical strengths complementing each other instead of creating vulnerabilities. "It's working," Marcus said, watching his scanner display as the biomechanical systems translated not just languages but tactical concepts between species. "The armor is serving as a real-time translation matrix for military coordination." "More than that," Lyra said, directing fire toward insurgent positions while simultaneously coordinating defensive movements. "It's creating tactical solutions that neither species would have developed alone." The battle turned in their favor as the unified defense began pushing back insurgent forces that had expected to face confused, uncoordinated resistance. But the improved coordination came at a cost. The biomechanical systems were operating far beyond their normal parameters, creating stress patterns that threatened to damage both the armor and its wearer. "Lyra, the neural load is approaching dangerous levels," Marcus warned, seeing warning indicators across his scanner display. "The system is overheating. How long can it maintain current performance?" "Maybe 10 minutes before we risk permanent damage to the biomechanical interface." "Then we finish this in 10 minutes, Lyra said with grim determination. What followed was the most intense military action Marcus had ever witnessed. Lyra moved through the combat zone like a force of nature, her modified armor systems allowing her to coordinate tactical responses that were simultaneously human and Zephyrian, combining the best of both species' military traditions into something entirely new. Marcus stayed close behind her, making constant adjustments to keep the biomechanical system stable while documenting performance data that would be invaluable for future armor development. But more than that, he was watching Lyra demonstrate exactly why she had earned her reputation as one of the most effective warriors in the Zephyrian Defense Corps. Insurgent retreat confirmed, came the report from base security. Perimeter is secure. As the immediate crisis ended, Marcus could see the toll the enhanced armor functions had taken on both Lyra and her equipment. The biomechanical systems were showing stress patterns that would require extensive recalibration, and Lyra herself was showing signs of neural fatigue from the intense integration. "We need to shut down the enhanced systems before they cause permanent damage," he said. "Agreed," Lyra said, but as Marcus began the shutdown sequence, she caught his hand. "Marcus, what we accomplished tonight. The tactical coordination, the real-time translation systems, the unified command protocols, this could change how multi-species military units operate." "It could," Marcus agreed. "But it also nearly killed you. The neural load from running multiple integration streams simultaneously is beyond safe parameters." "Then we develop better parameters," Lyra said. "We figure out how to create this level of coordination without the dangerous neural load. You don't think I'm letting you return to routine armor maintenance after tonight, do you?" Lyra smiled despite her obvious exhaustion. "Marcus, we've discovered something that could revolutionize interspecies military cooperation. That requires both of us working together." As they made their way back through the base, passing human and Zephyrian soldiers who were already discussing the unprecedented coordination they'd witnessed, Marcus realized that their partnership had evolved far beyond armor repair and personal attraction into something with genuine historical significance. "Lyra," he said as they reached the hangar where this had all begun, "are you sure you want to pursue this? The research, the development, the partnership, it's going to mean working closely together for months, maybe years. Are you trying to discourage me?" "I'm trying to make sure you understand what you're signing up for." "What I'm signing up for," Lyra said, turning to face him as they stood beside the workstation where their collaboration had begun, "is the most interesting and challenging work of my career. With the most competent and trustworthy partner I've ever had." "Partner," Marcus repeated, noting how the word sounded different now than it had hours earlier. "Professional partner," Lyra clarified, but her tone suggested the distinction was more complex than the words implied. "Though I suspect our working relationship will continue to blur traditional boundaries. I can live with that." "Good," she said, "because I don't think either of us has a choice anymore. What we discovered tonight, it's bigger than just armor modifications or tactical improvements. We found something that could change how different species work together. And we're the only ones who understand how it works." "Exactly." Lyra began removing her armor with Marcus's assistance, the familiar routine now carrying additional significance after the night's events. "Which means we're committed to each other, professionally speaking. And personally speaking?" Lyra paused in the process of disconnecting her biomechanical interfaces, meeting his eyes with an expression that carried warmth, exhaustion, and something that looked like hope. "Personally speaking," she said softly, "I'm looking forward to finding out." 6 weeks later, Marcus found himself in a situation he'd never expected, briefing Alliance High Command on innovations that had started with a simple armor repair and evolved into something that could change the nature of interspecies military cooperation. The conference room aboard the flagship Constellation was filled with generals, admirals, and civilian oversight officials representing every major species in the Alliance. At the center of the holographic display, Marcus and Lyra's joint presentation showed detailed schematics of the modified biomechanical systems that had proven so effective during the base defense. "The integration protocols you've developed," said General Morrison from Human Fleet Command, "they've been tested under actual combat conditions?" "Extensively," Lyra replied from her position beside Marcus at the presentation console. "Over the past 6 weeks, we've conducted 17 field tests involving mixed human-Zephyrian units. The tactical coordination improvement averages 43%. And the neural load issues that were noted in your initial report?" asked Admiral Kethvara from the Zephyrian Defense Council. Resolved through distributed processing, Marcus explained, highlighting the technical modifications on the display. Instead of channeling all translation functions through a single biomechanical interface, we've developed a network approach that distributes the computational load across multiple armor systems. Multiple armors working in coordination, General Morrison said thoughtfully. How many units can be networked simultaneously? We've successfully tested networks of up to 12 units, Lyra said. Theoretical maximum appears to be around 20, though we haven't reached the actual limits yet. The implications for combined operations are significant, observed Commander Tlex from the Andromedan Collective. Real-time tactical coordination between species with different communication protocols, different strategic concepts, different neurological structures. Different everything, Marcus agreed. But the biomechanical translation matrix can bridge those differences at the speed of thought. What followed was 3 hours of technical questions, tactical analysis, and political discussion about the broader implications of technology that could fundamentally change how Alliance forces operated. Marcus found himself increasingly impressed by Lyra's ability to translate complex technical concepts into strategic terms that military commanders could understand and evaluate. Dr. Reed, said Admiral Chen from Alliance Strategic Command, what would be required to implement this technology across fleet operations? Extensive research and development, Marcus replied. The biomechanical systems need to be redesigned for each species-specific neural architecture. We'd need specialized training programs for technical personnel. And we'd need to establish protocols for maintaining network systems across multiple ship and ground installations. How long? For full implementation. Probably 2 years minimum, Marcus said. But we could have prototype units operational within 6 months. And the personnel requirements? Marcus looked at Lyra, noting the slight smile that suggested she'd been expecting this question. The research and development would require a permanent joint species technical team, Lyra said. Personnel with experience in both biomechanical engineering and multi-species tactical coordination. Personnel like yourselves, Admiral Chen observed. Personnel like ourselves, Marcus confirmed. Dr. Reed, Commander Velnathy, General Morrison said formally, Alliance High Command is prepared to authorize the Joint Species Technical Development Program, with you two as co-directors. The position would involve permanent assignment to the Research Division, with authorization to recruit additional personnel as needed. Marcus felt something warm bloom in his chest at the offer. Not just the professional recognition, but the confirmation that he and Lyra would continue working together on something that had genuine strategic importance. General, Lyra said, we accept the positions, with one additional request. Which is field testing authority. The technology needs to be developed in consultation with active military units, not in isolation. We'd need authorization to deploy with combat forces to gather performance data under actual operational conditions. You want to maintain active duty status while conducting research. We want to ensure that our research remains relevant to the people who will actually use it, Marcus said. Theoretical improvements that can't survive combat conditions are useless to field personnel. Admiral Chen and General Morrison exchanged glances that suggested they'd been expecting this request as well. Approved, Admiral Chen said. Though I should mention that maintaining dual research and operational assignments will be challenging. We're looking forward to the challenge, Lyra said. As the briefing concluded and the various officials departed to brief their respective commands, Marcus found himself alone with Lyra in the conference room, looking at holographic displays that showed their collaborative work spreading across Alliance military systems. So, he said, co-directors of a joint research program. That's not something I saw coming 6 weeks ago. When you were repairing my armor in a hangar bay at 3 in the morning? When I was trying not to notice how remarkably attractive you are while maintaining professional boundaries during biomechanical calibration. You weren't as subtle about that as you thought, Lyra said with amusement. The armor's biometric sensors were recording your elevated heart rate, increased skin conductivity, and dilated pupils. The armor was monitoring my vital signs. The armor monitors everything within its sensor range. It's designed to assess potential threats and allies. Lyra moved closer, close enough that Marcus could catch that subtle scent that had been distracting him since their first conversation. Though I should mention that elevated vital signs aren't necessarily interpreted as attraction. They could indicate fear, stress, medical distress. Which did you think it was? I hoped it was attraction, Lyra said softly. Because my vital signs were showing similar patterns. Even though you're trained to maintain professional detachment. Especially because I'm trained to maintain professional detachment, she said. Marcus, do you understand what we're really agreeing to? Joint research directors, permanent assignment, working together for years to develop technology that requires unprecedented coordination between us? I understand that we work better together than either of us works alone, Marcus said. Both professionally and personally. And you're not concerned that mixing professional partnership with personal attraction might create complications? I'm terrified that it might create complications, Marcus admitted. But I'm more terrified of what might happen if we don't explore what this could become. Lyra studied his face with the same focused attention she'd given their technical presentations, as if she were analyzing data that could determine the success or failure of their entire project. Marcus, she said finally, when you reached to adjust my armor that first night, and I said, careful. I remember. I wasn't talking about the armor. I know. And when you froze, when you looked at me like you weren't sure what you were seeing. I was seeing someone remarkable, Marcus said. Someone who was trusting me with something more intimate than armor repair. What was I trusting you with? The possibility that someone could see you as both a warrior and a woman without being intimidated by either. And what did you see? Someone I wanted to know better, Marcus said. Someone I wanted to work with, talk with, build something with. Something like a revolutionary new military technology. Something like a partnership that makes both of us better than we are alone. Lyra smiled, the expression transforming her face from professional competence to something warm and infinitely more personal. Marcus, she said, I think our research is going to be very interesting. Personal research or professional research? Both, she said, reaching out to touch his hand. Though I suspect we're going to discover that the distinction is less clear than either of us expected. As they stood together in the conference room where their collaboration had been officially recognized by Alliance High Command, Marcus realized that what had started with careful hands and whispered warnings had become something that would define both their careers and their lives. Lyra, he said, what happens now? Now we go back to our research, she said. We develop technology that could change how different species work together. We test our theories under combat conditions. We document our findings for the Alliance Strategic Database. And personally, she said, moving close enough that he could see the complex golden patterns in her eyes, we find out whether two people from different worlds can build something lasting together. I'd like that. Good, she said, because our first joint assignment starts tomorrow. And Marcus? Yes. This time, when you're working on my armor, you won't need to worry about maintaining professional boundaries. Because we're both research directors now. Because, she said, reaching up to touch his face, I trust you with more than just biomechanical calibration. As they prepared to leave the conference room and begin their new life as both research partners and something more personal, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them here. What had started with careful hands and whispered warnings had become a partnership that promised to revolutionize both military technology and his understanding of what was possible when two people chose to trust each other completely. Careful, he said softly, echoing her words from that first night. Always, she replied, but her smile suggested that some risks were worth taking, especially when they led to discoveries that changed everything.